there is a painting that's one of my original paintings called Power from Within, and she's a goddess, very much in the vein of style of Hestia. It works very well for this class. So here is our class outline for the day. We will be starting off with a guided manifestation having to do with the goddess Hestia. I will talk to you about the mythos of Hestia and her etymology within the ancient Greek realm, her archetypal voice, ways to invoke Hestia, journaling prompts, and then at the end of class, you will have time to join me in an open forum to discuss what the topics we've been talking about today. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that for now. So what we will begin with is the guided manifestation for the goddess Hestia. If you would like to get yourselves in a comfortable position, I recommend you take a deep cleansing breath in through the nose, out through the mouth, as you are able to bring yourself into a centered, grounded space. You're going inward. You're welcome to close your eyes for this. Just make yourself as peaceful and comfortable as possible so we can bring us into the sacred circle with an invocation for Hestia. Goddess of the eternal sacred fire, illuminate our path towards inner peace and tranquility. Allow the flames of your hearth to warm our hearts, soothe our souls, and enliven our senses. Be with us in the dancing flames of the hearth and home, moving to an ancient rhythm of divine femininity and power. Teach us to be calm, centered, dispassionate, and clear-headed. Allow us to feel joy, satisfaction, and peace while maintaining the sacred fire which burns brightly within each of us. Allow us to reconnect with the deep nostalgia of creating a sacred space in our homes, to bring our hearths to life as the chill of autumn encroaches while the sunlight fades, urging us to bring fire to life within our sacred and protective dwellings, the circle of the hearth, contained, safe, and warming. Be here with us in this sacred circle as we honor your presence and importance in our lives. Shed light on our ability to be self-confident, true to our inner truths, while claiming mastery over our true callings and power in the world. Firelight of sustaining life, glow within us. Take a few deep breaths. And when you are ready, you may open your eyes and join me in the sacred space of the goddess Hestia. All right. Let us begin with the mythos and significance and etymology of the history of Hestia in the ancient Greek world. Hestia is a very powerful goddess, and her significance is very powerful among mortals. She's very unique in that her presence is subtle It's a constant, ever-present, comforting source of warmth and light. And she kept to her own devices. She was very confident and clear about every ounce of her being. She is a presence that compels us to go inward and to look within to find our truths and answers to our existence and our connection to the universe and our place in the world. Hestia was the firstborn Olympian deity to Rhea and Kronos. Now, Kronos and Rhea, they are titans. They are the offspring of Gaia and Uranus, the ones that had more of a powerful sort of urge to be rulers and conquerors, and they were very difficult beings, but very powerful. And Rhea and Kronos are the parents of the Olympian gods. Now, Kronos was paranoid about the feeling and the fated prophecy of the fact that he would be overthrown by one of his offspring. And he himself had done an act to put his own father, Uranus, in a different place by castrating him at the behest of his mother, Gaia, the earth goddess. So Kronos had an issue about this himself. And what Kronos did was he took and ingested all of his children. That's a very disturbing thought. But Rhea tricked Kronos when the youngest, Zeus, was born, and wrapped a rock in a swaddling cloth and swallowed it in its place. So Zeus went off and was raised on a sacred island, and he grew up in seclusion, hidden from the awareness of Kronos. Meanwhile, the firstborn, Hestia, was the first to be ingested. And she was the one who stayed the longest in that dark space, keeping to herself and her own devices to keep herself strong. And she came to being within that space. So she is the firstborn. And then when Zeus came back heroically and offered his father some wine laced with an herbal substance that would make him regurgitate, he regurgitated the children, the gods and goddesses. And when they were rebirthed, one might say, from Kronos, Hestia was the last to emerge. So she is both this, it's a kind of an interesting dichotomy. She's the firstborn initially from Rhea, but the youngest released, or the youngest born coming out of that rebirth space from Kronos. She kind of embodies both, and in the ancient religion, she was seen in both ways. I do like to think of her as the older sister, you know, the one that had things together for herself, witnessed a lot, and made clear decisions before even being brought fully to the light about who she wanted to be when she was released in her true primal goddess-like existence. And she had been pursued by other gods. Both Poseidon, her brother, and her nephew Apollo asked for her hand in marriage, but she refused them, and she swore to Zeus that she would remain a virgin and wanted that to be made officially so. And she refused to ever marry. Honoring this, and then honoring who Hestia was to him as the sister sibling, the firstborn, and all of these powers, it was made very clear by Zeus and by the other deities who witnessed this, that Hestia would be given an incredible significance and importance within the worship of the gods, and her predominance in what she presided over would have incredible power in the realm of the mortals. So she is the most revered of the Olympian gods for very practical reasons, because she is the god home and woman existence, the eternal sacred flame, which is the source of nourishment, warmth, light. And she is the embodiment of all of these things. And her subtle personality was such that she did not seek the heroic tasks or the wild romances or the offspring or any of the things that we typically associate with the famed Olympian gods, their children, the demigods. She kept to herself, and she was very contained within what she did, preferring to tend the sacred hearth and to keep that sustaining space, the sacred circle of the hearth, intact, and preside over this for humankind. So it's an interesting place to come from. She was very humble about things, very secure in her not needing to have all of the trappings of regal glamour or to be overtly represented in the classical arts. She is represented. There are statues of Hestia, but they are, how do you say, they're not as common or numerous compared to the other gods. And she's portrayed as a matronly goddess, wearing a veil, often seated on what is depicted as a wooden throne. She would have sat on a woolen cushion and would have been adorned with flowers, natural things, but not so much of the normal ways that we think of the Olympian gods as being portrayed. So she was always portrayed as this kind of beautiful, matronly, very, how would I say, very clear, wholesome looking goddess. And typically, the effigies of the goddess were not, as I say, very numerous. She was represented mostly as a circle, the circle which represented the form of the hearth. So she was the hearth itself to the ancients, as well as being a deity. She was the sacred fire. She was also the hearth, the essence that brought the home together. And in the ancient practices, she always received the first wine libation, and the offerings gifted to her were of pork. So the choicest, fattiest meats were thrown into the sacred fires. They were offered to her. That was always the first offering in the ancient ceremonies. So she had great significance and a beautiful connection with the mortals. Very calm, very present, very nurturing, very stable. It was something to be counted on. And it was also incredibly important to the mortals in the ancient Greek cultures to maintain the hearth, to maintain the central sacred fire within the community, but also within their homes. And that was tended to by the matrons, the women within the household would really preside over this. And consequently, the cooking, the baking, the nutrition that would come from using the sacred fire within the home, keeping the hearth burning. And when a woman went to be married, the woman's mother would take embers or take a torch that was lit from her central fire, the mother fire, the mother's fire, and would be brought to the daughter's new home to light a sacred fire in her own home when the young couple would go across the threshold for the first time into their new lives, into their new homes. So it's incredibly important to keep that sacred fire running constantly and going, the eternal flame. And sometimes there was a ritualistic need to put the fire out and then ritualistically bring it back to life. And if the fire went out mistakenly, they had to definitely take certain steps to sacredly relight the fire. It was a big deal. And you can think of that for ancient humans, how the discovery of fire, the cultivation of it, keeping it going was really important. And that played a role in ancient Greek society and the ancient religions. So she's a very important deity in that respect, and one we can think of, especially this time of year, which is why I wanted to discuss Hestia now, to bring her up to focus now as we are getting it further into autumn to fall, and that need as winter encroaches to go inward, to draw ourselves into a sacred, warming dwelling, our home, our hearth, to keep it lit, whether or not you have a fireplace. If you have a gas stove in your kitchen, if there's something you're called to light candles this time of year, something that makes it feel sacred, and that the warmth and light of that feeling of fire, of hearth and home, is just so important. So that's why I decided to talk about Hestia now. As this is currently being filmed, it is October 24th. Of the year 2021. For those of you who watch this in the future, you will understand why I'm discussing this now. Interestingly, although, Hestia was a virgin goddess, she didn't marry, she does have a very interesting connection with her nephew Hermes, the messenger god. Now, the two of them are the opposites of each other through feminine and masculine energy, their representations, and what they represented to mortals, which is incredibly important. So Hestia is represented by the circle, the hearth, the feminine energies of keeping home going, where Hermes, and she's quiet, right? She keeps to herself. She's very centered, very peaceful. Whereas Hermes is mischievous. He's the trickster god. He's the god of travel, commerce, communication, messages rather, and he would go off and go out, but he was very important to the society as well. And Hestia is represented as the circle, as I say, the hearth. Many representations of Hermes symbolically were of a pillar, or herm, which represents the male phallus and male fertility. So here we have the womb-like circle and the male phallic-like pillar. The circle was in the center of the home, or the heart of the home, in the kitchen area, wherever it would be kept. And outside, typically the front entrance of a home, there would be a pillar to represent Hermes. So they kind of worked harmoniously with each other, the need to keep stability and safety and something sacred to come back to for those who went to travel or to go off for commerce, that they knew that they could come back. They would be protected. So it was very interesting. And they were considered like very good friends, like best friends and neighbors. They were the good friends, the good neighbors of each other in the ancient form of the deities, which is a very sweet thing to contemplate when we think about those stories. They didn't have like an animosity between them. There wasn't a rivalry. Hermes was very mischievous, and he got into all kinds of hijinks, especially with his brother Apollo when he was little. But I like to think of that kind of cooperative significance that they would have together within the context of these two opposing forces to keep each other in balance. It's a beautiful thought. So, also, Hestia was typically shown with a staff, right? And Hermes has the caduceus, which we now know as the modern Western medicine medical symbol, the wand with the entwined snakes. That was his sacred wand that he carried with him. So they both had their sacred components and objects that they would have with them when they did their work. So Hestia, as I say, her mythology is mostly surrounding her sacred work. And you may not be as familiar with Hestia, but I would say culturally speaking, her Roman counterpart, which of course Romans used Greek deities, they changed names, they also came up with a lot of their own, and the symbology or symbolism was slightly different. But with Hestia in Rome, she's known as Vesta. And there were Vestal virgins in Rome that served the sacred temples of Vesta. So she was very important in the Roman side of the mythology as well. So there's the information about her background and her mythos. And it's very powerful and beautiful. I like to think about this. And now I would like to talk a bit about the significance of her archetypally speaking, as she is a much more subtle voice within us, though not unprominent and definitely important. She is the archetype, as I like to put it, of the Hermitess, the female hermit. And we have that space within ourselves. And I know we have the ability, no matter what situation we are in, if we are clear about this, if we're making conscious decisions in our lives and working with using what I call emotional alchemy, which is the act of being able to choose the emotional response you want to have rather than being a victim of them and allowing them to control you, Hestia would be the one to call on to bring that forth within yourself, the ability to practice the emotional alchemy, because she is like the sacred priestess, right, archetype, and she is a very calm, centered, focused, and confident goddess. She was so very clear about what she wanted from the beginning. And so her presence within us reminds us to be clear to our higher selves, our calling, what is sacred to us. Now that differs from person to person. What is truly sacred, what our true calling is, and what our work is that we can do to bring light, nurturing, and nourishing strength to the people that we love, the people we influence, our clients, if we're business women, things that we come in contact with, the people we teach, the children, if we have them, that we raise. How do we have this sacred calling within ourselves to be authentic and true to ourselves? And that goes in tandem with the Persephone class, which is about finding out your power within the core of yourself and discovering that as a woman. Hestia takes that one step further and is bringing that into fruition for yourself, bringing that into action, and choosing those moments where you step back, you use the eye and the mental clarity of the observer. Instead of being reactionary, you are observing and absorbing and empathetically deciding how to respond and what actions you will take to support that stability, the place within yourself that is truly grounded, centered, but not without power. The fire is so powerful. And in Hestia's case, it is a contained or controlled fire. It's not a raging fire burning everything in its path. It's sacred. It's centered. It's in the circle to keep it safe and protected, and it's tended to with care. So what is that inner flame? You know how people think about that spark, the flame that inspires you. With that Hestia energy, we can go there in that quiet space. And I highly recommend, while working with a Hestia voice, taking time to deep breathe, to meditate, maybe even candle gaze, or if this time of year you have the opportunity to build fires in a fireplace or wood stove, gaze at the flames and commune with that part of yourself, and with the Hestia, feeling the archetype and the goddess herself if you choose to. to bring yourself to that higher space, the contentment, the peace, the security and stability of being completely true and one within yourself without needing to be dramatic, combative, angry or stressed, sad, just calm and centered. Everything held in balance. So that is where I would like you to go with thinking about this beautiful archetype. I'm going to go ahead now, take a quick sip of water, and I'm going to share screen again so you can see some beautiful information about how to work with this goddess. All right. So now I would love to go over with you, and I'm going to read these out. And if you would like to take notes, I recommend it. You can also, you are more than welcome to screenshot or take a photograph of the screen. Put this together for you for ease of viewing and going back to review them. So here we have ways to invoke Hestia. Manifesting the goddess of the hearth. I love the manifesting bits of these archetypology classes because it's a practical way to think about bringing that archetype out from within yourself, but from the goddess herself to you in a spiritualist kind of way. So creating a sacred space in your home, a beautiful hearth or circular altar space for a candle to be lit. If for some reason you don't have a fireplace, but I also recommend doing the altar space with a sacred circle of crystals and a candle just in general, because it's a beautiful way to invoke Hestia. Meditating, going inward, being one with your higher self, being helpful to others without becoming emotionally involved, being an observer and being in the moment. As you notice, I say a lot of being, to be, the psychological concepts of be, do, have, in that order. So being first in the essence and the space of Hestia will allow you to do the sacred tasks that bring you to your higher calling. And then you will have that incredible power of an outcome that brings you to your goals. Items of power are, of course, the hearth, fireplace, an oven, wood, a kettle. And I would recommend, I mean, a tea kettle is great, a traditional one, but a cast iron kettle on a wood stove or near the hearth is an incredible representation of that energy of Hestia. And if you have a wood stove, of course, within the kettle, you put water so that it creates the vapor within your home, which is really beautiful. You also could bake bread or have fresh baked bread. Wine is very important. Pigs, of course, are a symbol that are important to the goddess, which it may not mean necessarily eating pork if you're a vegetarian or you feel that otherwise, but having a symbol of a pig in your home. And they make some really cute, like little shabby chic piggies or something ceramic, or maybe a carved sign out of wood, something to put in your home that's in the shape of a pig. They're very sweet. The flower yarrow, the chaste tree, or symbols of that, and that's a really beautiful tree. It's incredible purple flowers. Veils, which you don't necessarily have to wear. They could be a lightweight shawl or something that you may drape or over a window, like the over the top of your window, or maybe something that you put on the back of your couch that's very silky or lacy and feminine and very sweet. And I like to interpret this too as the circle, taking the circle and then the wood or wicker and having a circular wreath, like the wreath shape, bringing this actual literal representation of Hestia into your home. And you can put it in your home or on your door and adorn it with things that are representative of, you know, things that are important to you into your space. But certainly in the winter, pine bough wreaths would be absolutely delightful. Then she's also associated with other practical, tangible items like gold, silver, brass, things that would be rendered in fire, if that makes sense, dolomite, amethyst, garnet, fire agate. And wonderful essential oils you can work with and use to invoke her and to bring that feeling to you. Lavender, myrrh, amber, cedar, cinnamon, clove, pine or fir, any of the conifer oils, and angelica, which is also a plant. And there is also a blend I know that's available. That's the white angelica blend, which is meant for just bringing yourself to peace and calming you down. So those are all wonderful ways to work with that energy and invoke Hestia. And now I'm going to skip forward one more page to the final page of this presentation to talk about journaling prompts. And these I definitely recommend you photograph or write down physically if you can, because this is something I would love for you to work with in the next couple of weeks to come before we reach the next class. My next class will be about Hera, the queen goddess. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you a little bit about journaling prompts to work with that help you remember throughout this couple of weeks before the next class what to look at when it comes to Hestia and beyond, of course, anytime you want to invoke Hestia through journaling. So going inward to communicate with my Hermitess voice makes me feel like, what rituals can I bring into my daily life to bring a feeling of sacred harmony, protection, and nourishment to my body, mind, and soul? When I am quiet, being in the moment and at peace, these visions and realizations come to me. So that one is about what visions come to you while you're in that sacred space. How can I bring comfort, dispassionate listening, and sage advice to myself and others? Allowing my Hestia archetype to come forward is empowering because you fill that out based on what your meditations and your journaling brings you. You can always do stream of consciousness writing with a particular idea in mind and see what comes to you from this space. How does Hestia appear to you and what does she show you? I will stop sharing the screen and come back to you now. So here we have within this sacred space all of this wonderful information about Hestia to work with, and we still have some time at the end of class. I invite you to unmute yourselves, as now we can have our open forum and begin to talk about anything that may have come up for you. You can use the chat, but I prefer you just to communicate with me directly. So who would like to start? Anybody ready? Katie?
Are you able to hear me on this one?
Yes, perfect. And see you and everything. Yay, Katie.
Last time you couldn't hear me.
I know.
Yeah, so I love Hestia's energy. And it was funny as you were talking, I got my, I was like, oh yeah, she's in the Divine Feminine deck. And so I was kind of peeking at what it was saying about her. And it is just like, she's just has this warm, inviting presence. Mm-hmm. And like, basically like, how am I showing up as that in life, you know, kind of thing. And so, I think it's really neat too how like from the beginning she knew who she was and like, I don't want to get married, I don't want this, like I want that, like that kind of energy is just amazing to me, because how like I think when we come into this world, obviously we're babies, but I think intuitively we all have intuition, we know, and we have this authentic personality that we are, and then obviously the world gets a hold of us and we kind of lose that. And so I feel like this energy of Hestia kind of reminds us to say, like, get back to that. Like, you already know what you want and what you don't want. You just have to tap into it. So
yes,
that's what was coming up for me.
Oh, that's beautiful. And yes, very on point. And that is true. Like, I do agree with that. We come into this world with some path that's set before us, the potential we have, with the energy we have to reach for what our higher purpose is. And that is
Yeah.
really great, because it is true, when we tune into that Hestia energy, you will be able to kind of go back to those feelings and see if you can bring them forward, especially if you've gotten off track somehow in your life. So that's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'm wearing a carnelian that I'm pendant that I made after reading your post today about the crystal of the day.
Nice. Yes. I love carnelian. That is like one of it. And as a side note, just a fun thing, my son's school does the houses like Harry Potter.
Oh,
and they
nice.
have carnelian, rhodonite, malachite, and I can't remember the other one, but my son is in a carnelian house. So
oh, that's wonderful. Oh, I'd be curious. You have to send me the information about that. That's fun.
Yeah, it's kind of
wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this with me.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge. I mean,
my pleasure. Thank you. I love doing this. Would Monica or Kim, would you like to contribute today with anything that you may have observed? I know I can't see you. If you want to unmute, you can. Hi.
Yeah, you know, when I was listening in and just thinking about the sacred hearth and the sacred fires and things like that, it just really reinforces the idea that the ancients, regardless of where they were, they had some common knowledge and common practices, because my background is Latin American cultures and religions. And so the Mexica or the Aztec had the new fire ceremony, and this idea of extinguishing all of the fires and then reigniting it for like a new start. And that just reminded me of, this new start with matrimony and the mother bringing this sacred fire to light their new hearth. That's just something that really resonated with me, because I think of how we often in the modern world, we take so much for granted, and we don't really appreciate the significance of things like the hearth and the representation of what it is beyond just, a fireplace, for example. It is the center of the home. And that's something that just really resonated with me.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yes, absolutely, Monica. And I love how you also pointed out from your expertise how the other world traditions can and do also have similar shared knowledge that they would bring forward in very different deities, perhaps, but how mythology has similarities and connectivity all over the world, especially with beautiful sacred practices like this one. So that was wonderful. Thank you for sharing that information too. I love that. And since, the other half of my family is from Mexico, I also like to learn about the Mexican deities as well. Something I'm learning about the Aztecs and the Maya. It's fascinating. So thank you for that. And Kim, did you have anything you would like to say today or share? Any observations? You're welcome to share.
Just thank you. I really enjoyed it. And I'm very into candlelight, and I light candles almost every night, and it just gives me a homier feeling. And it also is an interesting time to have my mother come over. She's going to be staying with me for a while, and I'm trying to create a very safe space for her. And I don't have a fireplace, but the idea of the hearth and the home is special to me right now. So thank you.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And to speak to that with your mother archetype coming to you literally, right? her that safe space. That's something
Yes.
that's really special. And I do think there are ways that you can do that even without the literal hearth, that you can bring some of that energy. Consider doing a beautiful wreath that you put up to honor
Mhm.
and you could put it on your front door. You could put it somewhere beautifully in your living room, something that represents that sacred feminine circle. And you can still have that within your home. Also, candles. Everybody loves candles, especially this.
Right.
There's so many wonderful scented candles as well. You might find one that have the smells that I was talking about, the essential oils that you can use for Hestia. And of course, one of my favorite candle smells is very soothing, and it's lavender. So that's a wonderful one. But you will probably find candles that smell like Christmas trees. So that's a great option too. You could bring these things. That's for everybody. Look for those little tidbits, these things that we bring into us that bring out that warmth of the hearth within our hearts, as well as literally having them. So that's great, Kim. I appreciate you sharing that, and have a wonderful visit.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I am going to pop a link into the, just making sure I get this right because I'm multitasking and talking and typing. The Riku. I am going to, for anybody who rewatches this, but specifically for you lovely ladies, I would like to leave my link for my classes. I have some wonderful classes coming up, and remember they are bi-weekly. So I have next up, I have coming to you, and let me do something really quickly here. I am going to show you on my website because that's super cool. I can do that. I like this, all these shared screens. Let me go ahead and bring up my event page so you can see what's coming up. I have some really great classes planned for the month of November. Allow me to get there real quick. Get this organized for you. All right, allow me to share a screen with this so you can take a peek at what I have planned. I hope this works properly and you can see it, right? So this is my website, and I want to show you what I have coming up. So on October 24th, same time, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Pacific time. That's today. Hello. We've already done that one. That's Hestia. I know what I'm talking about. The next class coming up is Hera, Archetype of the Queen. That's Sunday, November 7th. Again, same time, and 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Pacific time. So Hera, of course, is one of the major archetypes. And I think great also this time of year to think about that, bringing that regal energy and that, again, sense of power into our consciousness while we're going into a time where we're going inward. This is a good thing to look at the external power for the next phase. So that's for the beginning of November. That's Sunday the 7th. And then on November the 21st, again, that's Sunday, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m., I have a different kind of class going on. This is Archetypal Gratitude, and it's a manifestation of abundance, health, and joy. So during that class, I am going to be working with the essence of and the feeling of expressing gratitude and how important that is right before we head into the Thanksgiving week. That's the Sunday before Thanksgiving. So I invite you to join me for both of those. But even though the theme for that gratitude class is a little different, it's still within the realm of archetypology. And you will find that I'm going to start adding more of those between the major goddesses, because you need a break, kind of work on more of this work and contemplate more and use some other important energy for archetypal purposes. So we'll talk about you. Katie, you consider yourself royalty. Yes, same here. Isn't that wonderful? I love that. So what we'll be doing within this, the realm of that class, it will be a little bit of review from some of the other goddesses I've already discussed, talking about harvest, talking about hearth, talking about the power of the changing of the seasons and going through the darkness, coming back out to the light and using that sacred fire. I'll be discussing those sorts of topics while also discussing very important journaling prompts to get you going with gratitude, things to maybe bring into your home, to bring that into fruition for yourself and your families. And things to use for decorating and just feeling in the zone of gratitude. So I would welcome you wholeheartedly to do so. And if you know any women that are interested in these sorts of topics, I invite you to invite them as well. You have my link. And if you are in my Women's Circle group, which I know you all are, you'll be seeing all of those wonderful things in Mystical Women's Circle. So without much further ado, the only other thing I would ask or remind, at the bottom of my event page, I do have a donations and tip button. It's in the link in the chat. You just click on that, scroll down to the bottom. If you felt this had specific value to you and you would like to contribute to my work to allow me to keep doing this, I like to not charge a specific dollar amount at this time while I'm building a following, and to give as much as I can to you for free. But tips and donations do help, and I really express the gratitude of receiving them. So again, thank you very, very much for being with me today, and I very much look forward to seeing you during the next Archetypology class. Have a wonderful and abundant rest of your weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank
Thank
you.
Bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you.